Now, we'll get to the top four seeds in a little bit, but we'll talk about the four quarters, especially since there were only four events to determine this field. Looking at the draw, which of the four quarters do you think is the toughest to predict the winner from?
I think I've got to go with that third quarter of the draw. You've got Gerwin Price, second seed, and as I just mentioned, potential clash with Peter Wright, the world champion, in the second round, which immediately you've got the second and third players in the world rankings in that quarter of the draw. You've also got, as I said, Mensah Suljovic, Dale Gurney just underneath, and then underneath that, one of the players that is playing some of the best stuff at the moment, maybe not getting the rewards that he perhaps deserves for his performances, Christoph Ratajski. I think that is, for me, the toughest quarter of the draw to call. Beyond that, I think the other three are quite similar. You've got some players that are in good form in those quarters of the draw. You've also got some big names that maybe aren't quite at their top of their game, and if they turn up, then they'll look at the draw, look at their quarter and think that's a good chance of making a semi-final. But fourth quarter, you've got Jose de Souza in there, who's we've seen a couple of weeks ago put in some magnificent performances on that stage on the European Tour, coming into this in some good form. The top two quarters, again, you've got Michael van Gerwen in there in the top half, Rob Cross, a former world champion, Devon Peterson, a winner on the European Tour, Joe Cullen, the man of the moment, the top seed. But I think I'm just going to give it to that third quarter, because there is, out of all four, the most quality, and the players that you think, wow, if these games turn out how we're going to think they're going to turn out, they're going to be the ones to watch.
I'm going in a different direction, but I agree. I think there's a good case for all of them. This is quite possibly the most wide open European Championship ever. And again, a lot of that comes down to a point you made a little while ago, that the top seed has always been either Phil Taylor or Michael van Gerwen here. And this time it's not. And one, because Phil Taylor's retired, and two, because Michael van Gerwen has struggled. And when you don't have that dominant force, it becomes more wide open. But even on a quarter by quarter level, there's a lot to be said that these are all difficult to pick. You mentioned that third quarter having the world number two and the world number three, as well as a few other top-notch players. That in and of itself makes it a difficult quarter to pick, because even if you say Gerwin Price and Peter Wright's chances are equal, throwing everyone else out, that at most gives you a 50% chance of being right, and the other players have greater than zero chance, much greater than zero chance. But I'm going to actually say that I think the top quarter is the most difficult to pick, because the number of players who could potentially come in and play so well but have question marks hanging over them. Nathan Aspinall, for instance, made the Premier League final, meant he had a great Premier League campaign, but didn't bring his best on finals day, and has been, I don't want to say inconsistent this year, but has not been consistently great. He's been on his B game a little bit too much to win titles, but we know that even his B game is pretty darn good, and if he's at his A game, he can get through this quarter. He might be the best player overall in this quarter. Then you also have James Wade, who's won double-digit major titles. You have Joe Cullen, who is, alongside someone in the bottom quarter, one of the two most underrated players in world darts, as I've said multiple times on here, and just happens to be the number one seed. And that's not even getting to the two most inconsistent players in this quarter. And I don't mean that as a disrespect. I mean that respectfully, because of how good Jamie Hughes and Dave Chisnell are when they're on. We're talking players who average in the 110s, and it's not surprising when they average in the 110s. But unfortunately for both of them, it's also not surprising when they average in the 80s. And we saw that from Dave Chisnell just this past week in Risa, be absolutely brilliant one day and nowhere to be found the next. But you only need to win three matches to get through that quarter. I think the fact that you have those two players in there alongside the other ones that I mentioned makes this the most difficult quarter to pick.